does not forget about people who bought their software 20 years ago. They still let those people upgrade to a newer version. Hatch software does not do this. I have Hatch Customizer, which is just a font program, because I thought I would try it. I only bought it a year ago, and now they won't let me upgrade it. They came out with an upgrade for other versions of Hatch, but they won't upgrade Customizer. So I was very upset about that, and it just made me realize how fortunate we are to have Embird, because the people at Embird are really good people, and they will let you upgrade from like even before 2004. So at any rate, that's one benefit. And this is a big pet peeve of mine, the terminology in embroidery software. The word connection in Embird is just that. It's a line of stitching that connects two objects. A connection is not a jump. A jump is meant to be cut off or trimmed so it has a tie off and a tie on. This makes discussing digitizing very easy. So let's just flip to this design in Embird Studio, and by connection and jumps you'll see what I mean. This sentence that I stitched out or digitized, it has connections in it, and most professional digitizers, let me zoom in, use the zoom button. Most professional digitizers will use connections between letters. Yes, you have a tie off at the end of a word, but between your letters you have connections. There's no tie off at the end of this E. There's no tie on at the beginning of this W. This is just a stitch. And so that's how the pros digitize. And generally, this word, these letters in this word would probably be even closer together, and so on. But let me zoom in a little more. You can see, and this is what digitizers do, they land a stitch point right between the two letters. And when you do that, it makes this whole connection invisible. And if I go into Stitches View and click on Points Editing Mode, tap once, and then draw a box, there's your stitch point. So there's a stitch point here, here, and there. There's no tie-offs or any tie-ons or tie-offs or anything. And you can see, if I move this, that's just a stitch. There's no tie-off there. And the beauty of this, Control Z, is that when you land a stitch point like this in between your letters, no embroiderer is going to be confused as to whether or not they're supposed to be cutting this. They'll know they're not supposed to because there's a stitch point there. So at any rate, so that's a connection. And so a connection is not a jump. A jump is meant to be cut off or trimmed. So go back into regular view, 3D view. You don't see the jumps. Like you don't see the jump from the D to the V. You don't see it. And that's because I'm in 3D view. 3D view is a true view of what will sew out. So this is how your design will sew out, because the jump that is between the D and the V is meant to be cut. You cut it there, you cut it here, or you have your machine do so. Because you could set your machine, most of them, to trim jumps. If it's a tubular machine, a lot of your single needle machines won't. They'll only trim on a color change. But a lot of times I don't let my machine even trim the jumps. I want to trim them because it slows down your stitching. It's harder on your machine. It's harder on your cutter, and so on. Sometimes it doesn't start it good when it starts the next letter. So, but at any rate, this is the 3D view, and this is what you want to see when you're looking at your finished digitizing project. You want to see this on screen. You want to see the connections because those are going to stitch. But you don't want to see the jumps because those are going to be cut off. Now, you can see the jumps if you go into Stitches view. They'll show up as dotted lines. And that's very, very easy to understand, to see the difference between this dotted line, which is a jump that's going to be cut, and this connection, which is solid, and that's going to stitch. Now, the other thing you can do in Embird, if you did want to see your jumps, even when you're in 3D view, you can go into Manager, and you can go to Options, Show Floating Stitches or Jumps. They mean the same thing. You can check that. So now you'll see them here, and you can see if I go into Show again, you'll see that it's checked. So then if I go back into Editor, into 3D view, now you'll see my jumps. And sometimes you do want to see them. You want to see them in 3D because you want to maybe plan out your digitizing, and you want to make sure they're not in the way when your design is going around, and so on. So, but the choice is there, and that's the beauty of it. So I'm going to go back into Manager because normally I don't show my jumps because I know where they are when I've made the design, when I made it in Studio, which is the show. Uncheck that. Studio is the digitizing module of Embird. Let me go back into Editor. So for me, oh, and let me flip this back into 3D. Zoom in. So the fact that they call a connection, and they call a jump is big for me. And the fact that you can actually see a true view of your design when you're in 3D view, that's big. So going back to the Word doc, this one we already talked about. 3D view is actually a true view. So you will see the connections between the letters, but won't see the jumps between the words. And I just touched on that. So I guess I covered both of these at the same time. You see an exact image of how your design will look when it is done stitching. This is how it's going to look when it's done stitching. with the connections and with the jumps trimmed. And then moving down. Embird is the lowest price software available that offers features only available in $7,000 to $10,000 software. And you'll see that once we get through all of these items. This is a big thing for me. Embird does not bog down your system. So when you are trying to edit stitch points or edit vector nodes, and you're trying to zoom in on your, and you're zooming in on your object or your design or what have you, you don't have to wait for the software to regenerate the stitch points every time you zoom in. This saves so much time and frustration. So for example, if I did go into, say, Stitches view and I clicked on points editing mode, this is where you can move your stitch points around. Now remember, I'm an editor, so these are stitch files. These are not vector objects, these are stitch files. So when I zoom in, you're going to see stitch points. But as I zoom in, you don't see the system bogging down. Even if I went and clicked on points editing mode and drew a box around it to see the stitch points, as I zoom in once, twice, it just zooms in. You don't have to wait for all of these squares, these little nodes to regenerate. They just stay put. Other softwares aren't like that. And I don't really want to get into like names of other softwares, but trust me, Embird does not bog down your system like a lot of the popular softwares do. So, so that's big. So now we'll go into specifically advantages of Embird Editor. I know those were kind of overlapped, but so in Embird Editor, that's the one I was just in, you can export cut files in either SVG or FCM format. That's for your brother machine. And it asks you how much you want to inflate it, because you know whenever you save or export a cut file, you want it to be slightly bigger than your outline or your die line, they call it, your placement stitch, your placement outline, because you have to take into consideration the width of your cutting blade and also your margin of error. This is big. When you group objects in the objects window, you get one object. You don't just get a whole long vertical slew of objects that are just grouped together, but they're still in a long vertical line. You actually get one horizontal line of the colors, and everything is very compact, and this saves space and confusion. And let me show you what I mean. So I separated all my colors, and everything's nice and small, but I want everything grouped for just this butterfly. Well, this butterfly, if I click here, I'm still on that butterfly. Click here. Now I'm on the inside. Click there. There's another outline I made. That's the blue final. And now this one is the satin. and then this one drops down. So from here up, I want to group this. All I do is I click on this bottom one, I hold my shift button, click here, come up here, join, and now they're one object. And the colors are still all right there in a horizontal line. And that is so nice. So you can work with a complicated design and not have to chase around all your grouped objects. You'll know they're grouped because you can see they're grouped horizontally. And so here, this one and this one go together. So I can just hold my control button this time and join. And then this one, join, and then this one. This one is grouped as one object, but you could see there's several items, and the reason why is because there's jumps after every word. That's your jump, your tie off, your jump, and you could locate that stitch if you want with the stitch locator. So then going back to the Word doc, so you get one object. And that leads me into what I just mentioned. When you are in Editor, you know you're working with a stitch file and not a vector file. And when you're in Studio, you know you're working with a vector file. So there's never any confusion what you're working with. And I love that. A lot of people write in Facebook and they're very confused with other programs because they think they saved it as a vector file, but really they brought it in as a stitch file and they had their program converted to a vector file, but of course it never converts beautifully when you do that, and they're just not even sure what they're working with anymore. That's a problem. But with Editor, you never have to wonder. So all of your files are pure. They're either pure vector files that you made in Studio, or they're pure stitch files that you either opened in Editor or brought into Editor from Studio. What you're buying on the internet are all stitch files, PES, JEF files, DSTs, those are stitch files. The other great thing in Editor is Embird's new features, the effect feature. It's amazing. I mean, I can't even tell you how much you can do with that feature. The one thing you can do is you can flatten fabric nap like fur or terry. People will call it a knockdown stitch, but there's a copyright on that. So Embird just calls it other things like plate or cavity. But anyways, this is where it is. Insert, effect, and then you choose. There's many choices now. They have like 5 choices, and I'll show you that in a minute. But so basically, the difference between plate and cavity is you can fine-tune how you want to flatten something, your fabric, by choosing either plate or cavity. Cavity kind of like is more, it goes, I'll have to show you, but it goes in more, and plate kind of starts from the outer edges more. But I mean, they make it so nice that you have such control. And you can also create offset outlines off of your design to make a unique patch shape that follows your design. So you don't have to just make a square patch or an oval patch or a, you can actually have your patch follow your design, and that is under Insert Effect Contour, and that's what we did here. That's what these are. These are like patches that are actually following the shape of the butterfly. And this one, that's why it has so many outlines in it. It's because I made it into a patch. And I have a 4-hour long video on how I worked with all of these files. It's very, very in-depth. And if you buy Embird from me, you'll get that 4-hour video. I also have a 2-hour video that kind of just highlights here and there. So my videos tend to get long, so and I apologize, but there's so much to tell you. You can also fill an entire hoop or work area or exterior of a design with motif or fill stitches. So in Editor, it would be as if, let's just say we only had one butterfly. So we'll just choose this one, but I'll hold my control button and delete the others. Click on the butterfly. I'll show you my hoop. If I click stitches, I can see the hoop. And so while I have it selected, I'll click the center button here. And I'll go to Insert, Effect, Exterior, and this time I don't want to give it a positive inflate, I want to give it a negative inflate. And since my satin is 4 mils, if I had it at 0 inflate, it would just come along the outside edge. But if I give it a negative 2 mil inflate, it'll come right in the center. And then it'll fill all this exterior. So it'll be beautiful. And I'll just click Ignore Cavity. I'll just go with the motif fill again with the same settings. Hit 3D. There it is. And as a quilter, I know that, say if you did want to use this as quilting stitches behind your design on a block, you'd probably want to make these the density looser. But just know that quilters don't want to have a gap between the stipple, any kind of stipple, and their design. That's a no-no to have gaps. So, and the reason being is because you want your design to pop, and you don't want to have a gap going around it. It's just not traditional. So this is what you want to do. You want to make sure, and you can see if I zoom in and click on stitches, you can see how this fill, this motif fill, comes right in the center of this satin, and that's what you want. And here's your density map, and you don't see any dark orange in here or anything. It's perfect. So like I said, if you were going to put this on a quilt block, and I know the design is kind of small for this block, but if you were, you'd probably use a looser fill. So let's go back. It seems like in any digitizing program, 12 to 13 is like the magic number, but I'm not sure. Let's try 13.5 on the width. It's not as consistent though. And that looks nice. That looks really nice. So the next advantage is that you can bring outlines, including your contours that you made in Editor. You can bring any of those outlines into Studio and turn them into vector files. This is big. If you have Studio, you can take this outline into Studio, and sometimes it's easier to make your outline here in Editor and bring it into Studio and just fix it a little bit. Sometimes not. And on my 4-hour video, you'll see the difference in these down here at the bottom and why that is so. But I'll just show you how I can bring this into Studio. So I'm going to slide it down here, and I'll just bring these both. I'll hold Control, right click, edit stitch file in Studio. So remember, this is a stitch file. We're going to bring it into Studio. So we're going to edit stitch file in Studio. Okay, we'll select them. We'll bring them into view. And like I said, we're not going to mess with the design, so we can just group it. It's still a stitch file, so it's manual stitches here. And we're going to right away go to Convert, manual stitches to connection stitches. So now these are all connection stitches, which is weird. And then we'll go Convert connection to outline. So now this object is an outline, and it's a vector object proprietary to Embird Studio, to Embird. So if I were to save this outline, it would be saved as an Embird EOF vector file here. But so at any rate, I can now try and make these stitches prettier. I could decide which side I like better and then just mirror it. So I'll just hit edit. I guess I'll choose this side, the right side. And there's way too many nodes. And I could go ahead and around and just hold my delete button and delete and so on. And but I could also just try to reduce the nodes number and smooth things out as well in the process. So I'll have it highlighted, go to Transform, reduce nodes number. 10 is usually a good number. You don't want to go past 11 usually. So it did smooth it out a little, and then when I hit edit, there's less nodes. So I'll just zoom in with my plus button and just kind of decide, what I want to do. Right now, I'm not snapping to any nodes or anything. That's another benefit of deleting, just hitting my delete button. And you could see this one isn't on the grid. It's not in the center. So I'll click Snap to Grid. Most of the programs have that, but they don't have Snap to Object Edges or Snap to Nodes. And those are the two biggies that Embird shines over all the other programs. But at any rate, I'm just going to snap to grid on this one. So there it is, it's snapped. I'll just tell it to place the start point here since I'm down there. So I'm going to split this. And then that one looks like it's snapped, but it may not be. Okay, now it is. And so I'll split it there. Split object. And so it's starting here and ending here. So the other one, well, let's just not get ahead of ourselves. Let's copy and paste. We might as well just delete the left side. We don't need it. So the right side will Control C, Control V. We'll just turn it so we know I don't confuse anybody. I'll do transform, flip horizontally. And I'll just kind of move it over kind of in place. So the first one, I actually like to go from left to right. So I'm just going to put this one before, insert before. And so this one is starting here and ending here. It's okay unless if we keep it as an outline, I kind of would want it to start down here. So I'm going to just do nodes, reverse nodes order. So it starts here and ends here. So this one needs to start at the top, and it did, I believe. Yeah, it did start there and end there. So now I could just tell this one, since it's highlighted, I could go to transform, snap to previous object, and it'll snap right on. And so I'll just, you could see there's no jumps because they're totally snapped. They're perfectly aligned with each other. And so there's no jump between the two. Yes, there's a jump here because it's a color change. But I'll select them and do transform, combine outlines. Okay, so if it didn't combine into one object, then we need to re-snap these. So let me go zoom in. I'll just click on one of them and hit edit. And so now we'll use snap to nodes. So I'll click on snap to nodes, and the one I'm editing, the one on the right, if I lift up this node and put it back down, it'll snap exactly to the previous, any other node that it's near the one I want, of course. But, so it's snapped. I mean, it's just the slightest amount will not allow it to snap. And then because if I zoom in here, you could see they're just ever so slightly off. And so I'll just snap it on. So now, and the margin of error is so small, that's why there was no jump there. They were like, that was microscopic practically. So now I can highlight them both, zoom out, and I'll go to transform, combine outlines, and now we got one object. And I'll just center it just like I centered the blue, transform, bring to center, and there you have it. So now we have a beautiful outline, and we can do anything with those. So we can go into parameters and give it any one of, here's a 4mm feather stitch. So that's beautiful. We can go into in parameters. We can click up here, go into user editor, go into outlines, click on one of these 5 slots, click open, and here's where I have my custom outlines saved, and I can just put a few in here. Let's see. These are all just custom outlines, and most of these are for sale. I think I have 17 of them for sale. They're all just very beautiful. So let me just click OK. Okay, so I am in 3D. Oh, because these aren't generated. When you bring them into Studio, you have to generate them to see them. And so I'll go into parameters. This one's going to be wide, because that's the way I had it set, the default. So that's pretty. That's a little different. I can zoom in, you can see them. They're all beautiful. They're just so lovely. That one's a little different. And here's the chain that everybody likes nowadays. And what's nice about my chain stitch, there's no line going through the center. And you can see the Embird one, where is it? It has a line going through the center. Now, sometimes you do want that because you want it to be filled in, but sometimes you don't. In one of my videos, I liked it better when it was filled in. And if you do arrange outline parts, if you have a bunch of these and you need to arrange them and branch them so that they all stitch out within one continuous stitch. Well, this one will, because it is just one continue, but if I had a bunch of them, like I did in through here, I had to use for all of these outlines, I had to use the branching. And I did try the chain stitch on it, but I only liked the chain in here when it had the line going through the center, because of the nature of this design. So, and this isn't really how this design is. It doesn't have a solid fill. If you recall, we brought that in. In fact, but at any rate, so those are all, not all, but this just shows you what you can do if you have Studio. And the 4-hour video that I have on, on Embird and Editor and Studio, it shows so much more than what I could show you here. So, but at any rate, this outline, you can also turn it now into a satin if you wanted to make it into a patch, and you can have all of your other outlines that you need for your patch, like your placement and your tack down and everything else. And you could just make them right off of this outline. So, you would go single stitch and so on. You can expand it a little bit more. So moving on to the next features, you can add stitch points quickly and easily. To sink a stitch point there, you can click on points editing mode, or like before, you can have the item selected and go into this parts window and highlight whichever one where you want to sync it, and then just hit points editing mode. And then if this is where you want to sync it and the arrow's going to the right, you click, first you want to click outside and then click on the node that's, before the arrow, and then insert, and then that's it. And then you can move it up right between here and the beginning of this satin. And so then in 3D, there it's sunk. And when you see that, you'll know you're not supposed to cut it. And then you could keep doing that, with all of your letters. So now we'll talk about the advantages in Embird Studio. And I did touch on it a little bit when I brought the stitch file into Studio. But I wanted to talk about the types of vector files that you can import. And this is big. When you import them, they will be digitized automatically. And a lot of people will tell you, oh, you don't want to auto-digitize and you want to manually digitize, and auto-digitizing is more hassle, and it never comes out good. It's always complicated. Well, that's not always true. In fact, if you bring in a vector object that's halfway decent, a lot of your work is done. And then you can snap to the nodes of that vector object and improve on it and still maintain the integrity of that image. So you can fix a lot of images and vector files in Inkscape, which is a free vector program. You can do all that and make it simple and beautiful in Inkscape before you even import it into Studio. So this is really a big advantage of Embird over the other softwares. Other softwares will say, oh, well, we can bring in an SVG as an image file. You just do, import image or whatever, something like that. But then you're relying on that software's substandard vector program, where it will convert something into their own proprietary vector format. Those are never as good as a real vector program like Inkscape. So in Inkscape, you turn it into a vector program, or Adobe Illustrator, or Corel, or what have you. And then, as long as you're able to import it in as that vector file, then it will come in the same way that you saved it in, say, Inkscape or Adobe Illustrator or Corel Draw or what have you. So you can be assured that it's coming in pure as a pure vector file. And that's very important. So, This is big because you now have a vector file that you can change just as if you digitized it yourself, because it comes in already digitized. But it's digitized around the exact outlines and parameters that, I shouldn't say parameters, it's digitized along the exact same outlines of the vector file. So let me just show you what I mean. If I were to go to let's see, try a little butterfly. Here's the butterfly that I believe I brought in, and I can download this as a vector file. In fact, I think I already did. So you would just click here, because this is a vector file that Embird will accept. So you don't even need to rely on Inkscape. You could just download it from this free openclipart.org. These are license free. So you can just download the vector file and you're done. Import it into into Studio. But if there were no option to import it as a vector file, you can import it as one of these raster type files. PNGs are rasters, they're pixelated, and you can turn it into a vector file in Inkscape. So I already downloaded this, so I'm just going to go into Studio and I'm going to show you how I would import it. Import vector file. So design, import vector file. Here it is here. And as you can see, it's already digitized. And this mistake here was like that from the artist, which is probably why it's free, and it's license free. As you can see, it was like that. It's not perfect, but you can fix it. You can fix it in Inkscape. You can fix it in Studio here, and I fixed it in Studio. And I used all the tools in Studio to fix this. I used a lot of the Snap to nodes, and just a lot of tools that Studio allows you to do to easily fix this. Now I could just leave it like it is and go ahead and generate the stitches because it's already digitized, and I could go into parameters. I can give it an angle, probably go with 90, and I can give it a fill. I'll probably go with, I like fill number 5, so I probably would go with that, and I'll just hit apply. And this is a complicated design, so sometimes it looks like your parameters window didn't go away, but all you do is you right click then on the object window, go to parameters, and then just click OK, and it's fine. And I'll go into 3D, and so there it is, it's digitized. And you could leave it like that, or you could fix that in through there. And you probably would want to make the tentacles a little wider and turn them into a satin. And so I'll show you quickly one method that I like to use a lot. And this involves the Snap 2 tools of Embird and the Transform tool up here. So let's just go into vector view, and the first thing I'll address is probably just the head, and I just want to make it a circle. So I'll go to my fill tool, I'll click once, I'll click shape, ellipse, 16 elements is fine, and I'll hold my control and I'll just click anywhere. I don't have to click on the red square, and I'll draw a circle and hit enter twice. And I'll go ahead and turn this a different color, and I'll put it behind the insert before. So I'm holding down the right mouse. Let me just control C. I hold down the right mouse button, let go of the right mouse, insert before. And I'll just one thing I did forget to do is I forgot to center the butterfly. So I'll just select everything and do transform, bring to center, and I'll go edit because I want my grid to show. So edit, preferences, grid. And usually if you select something other than what was in there, the grid will show up. And there it is. And of course I could go in and make it smaller, but it's fine. It's perfect now. So now I'll just take my circle and I'll just, I'll kind of zoom in with my plus key, and I'll kind of put it where I think I want it to go. If you notice, I'm lining it up with the right side of, or the left side of the black butterfly. And actually, let me turn the butterfly pink, and let me go ahead and select it and do objects, erase stitches, just so that I could see the vectors. And so now I'll click on the green, and I'm going to make the circle just slightly above this pink line here, because when I weld everything together, I don't really want to have to deal with this. It'll all just go away. And I'm kind of, like I said, I'm lining up the left side of the circle there, and but maybe I don't want to do that. Sometimes with circles, you want to make them a little bigger because the pull compensation actually makes them smaller anyways. But let's just see if I go a little bit smaller on this side. And I think I'm going to go with that size. I'm going to try it. And I will do transform center horizontally so that this center mark is on the 0 of the grid. So center that, and let's go ahead and let's hold my right mouse button and put the green one after and just see. So you can see that it really wasn't digitized perfect when they created it. You could see this is different than this side. If I pull down a horizontal guideline, I can see that I'll just follow this one. Zoom in. Oop. Control C. Grab the guideline. You know, I can see that the 2 points here are not correct, and I can actually make this side look just like this side. So I'm not going to weld anything yet. I'll weld everything at the end. and I'll just decide which side I like better. And I actually like this side better. So I am going to just go ahead and grab my outline tool here. And I am going to find a point on the circle that I want to use as my point of it's going to be the point I use on both sides, I should say. So it'll be this point and this point, and that's where I'll start my outline. So I'll click once. I'll click on Snap to Node first because I want to snap to this node. And this is what I mean about Embird. This green is a previously laid down vector object, and these Snap to tools are just indispensable. You just can't be without them. So I snap to that node, and now I'll come down here and I'll snap to one of these. I'll just snap to this one. I'll probably end up, let me do edit lock guidelines. I'll probably, let me just click out and then snap to. Okay. I'll end up getting rid of that other pink node probably. And so now I'm going to follow this and then that. So I'm actually going to, now I'm just going to snap to object edges. So I'm going to uncheck snap to nodes and snap to object edges. I'm going to click here, right click and insert, and I'll insert just a couple of nodes. And so this one I'll just, now it's, you can see I can slide it around. It's snapping to the object edge. And if I get close to the pink, it wants to snap to the pink. But if I zoom in, I can stop that. So, and again, it is wanting to snap, you know, to the pink. But that's okay. I was able to get it by zooming in. And so then this, I'll slide it to see if I need to insert another node. Right click insert just to get everything snapping. And I'll zoom out. And then I'll just we'll take the square node away, you know, on either side of the curve. And then the curved node will go in there. We'll slide it into place. And then there's that. So this is my line that I'm going to copy and paste and bring over to here. I'll hit enter. So, and at this point, I can, before I go any further, I can make sure that this is snapping to the grid, to the guideline down here. Let's see. It's not really, but I can click on guideline, snap to guideline, and I can just move it up in here. So now it's snapping to the guideline because that's the guideline I'm going to follow. So now I'll copy and paste it. Control C, Control V. Transform, flip horizontally, hold my control button, move it into place. Now, I don't have to worry about moving it into place. Since I use those 2 points on the circle, I can make the circle say start here and end there, and then move this right after the circle. So let me show you what I mean. If I click on the circle, hit edit, this was the point that I was using. It was the pretty much the diameter of the circle. And so I'll click here And I'll just place my start point here, and then I'll click here. Now let's see. Oh, they're not even. Okay. So I have to bring the guideline down. Oh, I have lock guidelines. Let me unlock them for a minute. Okay. I'll lock them back up. So I have to get a node right there. So I could do that one of two ways. I can hit enter and just copy and paste the circle, Control C, Control V. I'm going to make it a different color, go back to the green, hit edit, and I can just go ahead and I can right click insert so that it gets closer, but that's a round node, so I have to do it one more time to make it square. And now I can just snap that to the guideline and to the object edge. So it'll snap to the circle and the guideline. So it snaps right into place. So it's perfect. And so I'll make that my end point. Place fill endpoint, zoom out. So now this pink one here, so I can get rid of the blue. This one here, it's just kind of out there. I can hold my right mouse, let go, insert before, so it's right after the green, and the green is ending here. And then this one, let's see where it's starting. It's starting up there. So I click on the pink, I go up to transform snap to previous object, and it's snapped right in place. Show you that again. I have just the one highlight, and as long as it's after the green, transform snap to previous object, and it snaps right into place. And so, I mean, at this point, I could just kind of turn this into a fill, and because I could take these two and connect them and turn them into fill and this and that, but I'm not going to. There's so many ways to proceed at this point. I'm just going to take the pink and I'm going to snap it to the edges right here to this line, and then I'll fix these two down here. So, so I have the pink selected, and I'll hit edit and insert, and let me hit enter again. If you're worried you might mess up the pink, just copy and paste it, Control C, Control V, turn it a different color so you know to delete it later. And we'll go back to the pink and hit edit. And I'm going to, first I'm going to uncheck all of these and just snap to nodes, because I'm going to snap up here. So this in here doesn't matter what happens because it's all going to get welded. So I'll just take this one. Now, I do want to snap to this guideline. So the guideline and the point. I might have done it anyways. Let's see. If I didn't, you just pull it off and snap it back on. And then I don't need the guideline now. Well, I will need it for down there, but that looks fine. Maybe I'll add another node just to, I don't want to snap to the point now, to the node. I want to snap to the object edge. There we go. Because you can't have both clicked, both snap to nodes and snap to object edges, because it'll get confused. It's like, well, where do you want me to snap to? And yes, if you zoom in, you can change that, but it's better just to choose one or the other. And so that's done up there. And so then these I will have a node right there. Because it does seem like I put one there, but I don't recall. Well, it's actually there. It was snapping to the green. And let me uncheck that and check the edges. And there you go. And there's, we're snapping to the green. The pink is what we're working on. It won't snap to that anyways. So, let me go down and right click insert so that, I'm sorry, click on here because the arrow is going this way. I want a curve node here. So we click to curve, and now I have a curve to snap to that edge. And then down here, I don't really need all of these. I'm just deleting them. Let me see what we have going on down here. So I'm going to snap to that node. I'm going to delete that. It's pointing this way, so I want it, whoops, Control Z, I want a curve. To curve, so I get a curve node, and that's snapping. So now I just pretty much have to deal with how I want, to adjust this. And I basically am going to just click on these and delete. The arrow's going down, so they'll be deleting in this direction. Maybe I'll delete that one. And that almost looks like it's a subtle curve over there, but let's see. When I remember, it's going like that. So I'll just delete that one. And that one. And this one. Insert so that that's square like that one. And let me just delete this now and see. I mean, it's pretty straight. If I right clicked to line, so now that's a line. So I'm just going to leave this one as a line and hit enter. So we don't need the blue anymore. So there's our pink. The blue we just copied and pasted for security reasons. So now we don't really need these outlines anymore because everything is, this whole side was recreated, and so we're done with them. So there it is. So now we just have to fix the tentacles. And let me just save this. I'll just say home, new, delete, butterfly. And so now we figure, so I'm still not welding anything yet, but we figure, and I could weld the head if I wanted, but it's okay. We don't have to. Sometimes it's better to keep the circle intact. And we just kind of want to look at the two tentacles and see which one we do like better. This one looks better at the top. And we know we have to widen this because it'll stitch better, especially, I guess if we made it a satin, it would probably be fine, but that's pretty small. And in fact, I should have been in millimeters because I think I forgot. So that's okay though. I can kind of eyeball it and see. So the butterfly itself is like 4 inches wide. And I have decided that I like this tentacle better. So I am going to make life easy on myself, and I am just going to outline the entire butterfly and then separate the tentacle and work with it as an outline. So I'll do, I have the butterfly selected. I'll do convert, create outline from fill. And the only part of the outline, and let me turn it, I'll just turn it blue, and I'll hide everything else. The only part of the outline I'm interested in is this section, so I can kind of touch it, and that's the object I want. So all the other ones I can just slide down and hit delete. And then this, I want to separate this from the rest of the design. So I'll hit edit, I'll zoom in, I'll just insert, so that's a square node. I'll say place start point here, and then I'll split it here. So I'm just going to have this whole thing. So I'll write, oopsie, let me go back, edit. I have to redo it. Insert, place start point here, and then here, I'll right click split object. And so now it's split off. And so now I can make it a little wider. So I can actually turn this into a fill at this point if I want. It might make things easier, but it doesn't matter. But I will. And you don't have to worry about going down here and connecting. Let me click out here and connecting these, making it a fill. It's already a separate object, so when you convert it to a fill, it'll just make its own line. So I have it selected, convert, create fill from outline, and I don't really need the outline anymore. And I'll just work with the fill. And I actually don't need the butterfly anymore, so I'll just delete it. And so now I can just bring back the pink one and the green, and I can copy and paste this blue just to make sure that in case I make a mistake, I have something to snap to. Control C, Control V, make that orange. I'll go back to the blue, and now I'll hit edit. And I wanted to make it wider in through here. So I'm going to click on a node. We're going up, so I'll just start deleting. I'll just start deleting here. Zoom out. Delete. And I could probably delete it pretty far up. And then just grab the round node. Maybe that was too far. Control Z. Let's see now. That might be better. And I don't want to snap to anything now. Let's just see how that looks. I'll hit enter. Let me hide that. That looks fine. So I'll go with that. So I'll get rid of the orange now. And on the blue, I'll Control C, Control V. I'll flip the second one. Oh, actually, you know what? I kind of wanted to make sure that the first blue one, let me delete this, was overlapping. And it is, because you do want an overlap, and for when we weld it, and it is overlapping. So Control C, Control V. Have the second one selected, transform, flip horizontally, hold your control button, move it into place, kind of where you think you want it to be. I mean, the other one was, still under there. But at any rate, we're going to select them both anyways, and we're going to bring them to center horizontally. So I have them both selected, transform, center horizontally, and they moved ever so slightly. And so now that's what we're going to use. So let's go back to the pink and let's delete, the tentacles. So I'll hit edit and I'll just click. So I'm going up. This part in through here doesn't matter because it's gonna look at the green circle when I weld it. So I'm just going to zoom out and start holding my delete button down. Just make sure it goes in the right spot, and it did. Okay, so I'll zoom in now and see what's what here. So this is fine. So that's all I needed to do. So, and if I'm really worried, I can, no, I'll just leave that like it is. It's fine. Everything is overlapping. And it's interesting that one came lower. I must have slipped on my, yeah, see, that one is lower. I saw down here it was lower. So I'm going to align them from their bottoms. So I'll have them both selected, transform, transformation window, the alignment tool, here's the bottoms. So I'll click apply and they just moved. Now they're perfect. And let me also make sure they're still centered and nothing happened. And make sure now they're still overlapping, and they are. So now I can leave those as satins and move them up, insert before, and just leave them. And I could save this in two different methods, two different manners. So I could say, okay, I'm just going to save this as, didn't I save it as new? Yeah, I'll just save it as new. And now I will actually just union the head and the body. And I could leave the head as a satin as well, but, and I can make these all different fills and whatnot. But I did save it as new that way, so I could come back and do whatever I want. So I'll just go ahead and union those. So I have them both selected, transform, shaping, union. And if you don't get one object, once you click this, then you know you don't have an overlap. Obviously we had an overlap, so we're fine. So I don't need these two. And so there's your butterfly with your satin up here. And here you see that I have a scissor. So I always like to go left to right, insert before. So I have a scissor, and let me go ahead and connect those two. So I'll right click on the scissored one, create connection, see where the connection, so the connection's on the outers. I don't want that. I want them to be on the inners. So I kind of messed up. So that's because I switched their order. Well, no, not really. This is starting here. So let me go ahead and end it. Let me put the fill start point and end point on the inside. I just think it's safer. This is a fill, so we can do that. So place the fill end point. So the start and end are there. And then this one, you can see that the connection followed suit. I don't even have to mess with it. And then this one, edit, place start point here and end point. Then it'll be interior, and now our connection is there. And your connection, if you hit parameters, I could change the length of them. If I don't want to have them small, I can go ahead and say, you know, I want to make sure these aren't too tight. There's no need to make them too tight. So I could change their stitch length. And I can select them all. I don't have to worry about just selecting the fill or whatever. And I can go into parameters and hit auto column. And I usually bring my density up a little and hit apply. And let's just see in 3D how that looks. I think my connection needs to be edited. It's going to be in the way. So I'll right click, insert, and to line, right click to line. That makes me feel better. Now when I hit generate, it's not, you know, so much in the way. And let me see what I had for this. It defaults to fill 1 and 0 degrees. I can try it both ways. Let me just save this as a different name first. So new, and then I'll say new, this is getting long. Tribal satin tentacles. I'll never remember. But anyways, so on the parameters, I'm going to just try it at 90 because I know this butterfly looked better at 90. And what was the fill that I liked? I think it was fill number 5 I liked on here. And I don't have to make the density that tight. I'll just go slightly higher and I'll hit apply. This means it's looser. Now remember, the butterfly itself is complicated, so it may look like your parameters window didn't go away. You just right click on the object, go to parameters and hit OK, and you're fine. And so the nature of a circle, you see when you're going in 90 degrees, you lose some of your integrity here. Sometimes you can fix that by saying complete rows. If density is above, we can make it 4, but I doubt if it'll work. This just means that the edges are going to be smoother, but we'll try it and see. And we're going to outline this so it won't even matter. Okay, so it really didn't do much, so I'll just hit cancel. And I'll make these all the same color. And now it's just a perfect butterfly. Let me do edit, erase guidelines. And it's beautiful. We can try it going in 0 degrees since the tentacles are satin. So when you zoom in, just so you know, you can see that it's a perfect satin. So let's just see if I go with 0, how that will look.
it might not look that great. No, it actually looks great, even better. The circle is better and everything. So, either way. So then at that point, if, this one is saved with satin tentacles, which you probably would leave them like that, but if you didn't want them satin and you wanted everything welded, you can go ahead and weld the whole thing. And so I'd have them all selected and go to Transform Shaping Union. And notice I can still union this satin auto column, and the reason why is because the satin auto column is technically a fill. Sorry, I have a cold. So it's an auto column fill. So we can still union it. And so we'll go to Transform Shaping Union, and you do get one object since we have that overlap. So, but if we go ahead and generate that, let's try the fill number 5 again, because it's a brand new object, so you have to put your fill back in. And I'll just keep it at 0 and see, and hit apply. The tentacles aren't going to look as good. But, they're not bad. But I'm going to go and open recent and go back to the satin ones. I just think they looked better. And so there you have it. It's just beautiful.
So then moving on, the snapping to nodes, we already discussed that. The next and biggest benefit of choosing Embird, you can snap to the nodes or object edges, so either or, of any previously laid down vector object. This includes the SVGs, etc. that you imported, or the vector objects that you manually created in Studio. And we did that when we snapped to that outline of, we created that outline to mimic this, then brought it over, and then snapped the pink of the fill to that outline edge to create that so perfectly. And, I could have just as easily snapped to, this vector object that I brought in if I needed to. There's just many benefits of the snapping, especially when you're recreating font or editing your font. When you're using TrueType font, you really need to be able to snap to object edges, because what you do is you make a font and then Control A. Oops. You make a font and then you copy and paste a letter that needs work, and then you snap to certain parts of that object edge and not to others. So I'm not going to go into that though, because this video is getting too long, but just know that it's very valuable to have that. And here's the other thing. Some of the lesser expensive software, and by lesser expensive I mean the $1,000 softwares, they don't even let you bold your fonts. So, and that's not good. You need to be able to bold your fonts. So not only does Embird allow you to bold your fonts, either true type or an Embird font, they also allow you to expand those fonts to make them even thicker. And so moving on, you can also expand any fill or column object. And remember, expand is not the same as a length by width increase. Expand is a 360-degree ballooning. So just, think like what a balloon does. It expands in all directions. So you can do that for any fill or column object. And you can do this to get a cut file. Because when you want a cut file, you want to expand it in this manner, 360 degrees. So then moving on, the software doesn't decide if you have connections. Just because your letters or objects are farther apart, you can tell it that you want connections or jumps with tie-offs, either or. You can tell it that. Software doesn't decide just because of the spacing of your objects. And that's good because if you want connections between letters, you want them no matter how far the letters are apart. If you generate your stitches and you see that, oh, that connection has too many stitches in it, you could then just go ahead and move the letters closer together. But you want to be able to see that you have connections. You don't want to have to go into Stitches View just to see if you have connections or not. And there are softwares that make you do that, where you have to hunt and see if you have connections or if you have trims or what have you. Whereas, Embird, when I go and make this font up here, whether I'm editing it, edit text, whether I'm editing it or whether I'm making it from scratch, I'm telling it right here, do I want connections between letters or do I want jumps between letters? I tell it right away. And when I told it that I want connections between letters, and the first time I generated this, oops, messed it up. The first time I generated this, I saw that some of my letters were farther apart, and so I just I moved them closer together and whatnot. But at least I knew that there's connections here. I don't have to go into Stitches View and look for whether or not there's a scissor here or something or anything. So, and I can always see it too in my window here, my objects window. I can see that I have a connection between each letter. I always see my connections. That is so important, and I should probably add that you can always see them. So that's big. And the other thing, and I think I went over this, you have total control over the stitch length of your connections. You can assign a total stitch length to all your connections, or you can just choose one connection and change its stitch length. And we did that also. And this is very important when you want to sink a stitch point between two letters so that the connection won't show. And you can turn your connections into outlines or manual stitches if you want. And that's a good handy tool to have. For instance, if say, I know this wouldn't happen on this letter, but let's just say if I took this H and I started it up here, this is a fill object. I can start it wherever I want, place fill start point there, but yet the C is still down, ending down there, down at the bottom. Now you notice my connection went all the way up to the where the H is starting. And so sometimes you have no other choice but to turn that connection into an outline and then split it. So I'll edit this connection, but here's the thing. I can edit it and I'll just do insert and I can have it go like that. Let me just insert another one so it's not on a slant there. So it's really far away from the edge. So, and then you can say, okay, I want to generate that and generate all of this, go into 3D. And there is a stitch point there, but what is my stitch length on this outline? Okay, it's a max of 1.7, but do I really want to have a 1.7 connection going all the way up? Maybe not. Sometimes situation exists where you need for that connection to be longer up in through here because you don't want bunching of your fabric and so on, or too much density in there. So you would turn this whole connection into an outline, convert connection to outline, and then you would go back into vector view and you would hit edit. You'd split the outline here, and then this one you would turn back into a connection. So you have it selected, you'd go convert outline to connection. So now that one's back to a connection, and this one now is just an outline, and you can set it for a longer stitch length if you want, even, so that it's not so tight. And the other reason why this would come into play is if I go into 3D, let's just say, let me generate this. Okay, there's a stitch point, but what if it was a lot closer? Say if the C was a lot closer, and then I generated that and it didn't get a stitch point, and so I had to go and make the connection even smaller. Hit edit. I had to make it like really small. Generate, and now I got another stitch point in there. But would I have really wanted, going to parameters on this connection, would I have really wanted my outline going up to be this short? No. So that's the beauty of being able to switch back and forth between outlines and connections. So that's really nice. So then to sum that up, we turn our connection into outlines or manual stitches, but in this case I turned it into an outline. So I turn my connection into an outline. Then we just split that outline close to where we want the connection to be. And that's what I did. I split it right here. So I had this long connection, and I turned that connection into an outline. I split it close to where I want the connection to be, so I split it right here. Turn the shorter outline back into a connection, and that's what I did. I turned this one into a connection again. Then assign shorter stitches to the connection, and so that's what I did. I made these smaller so that I could sink the stitch point still. And then longer stitches to the outline, and I gave this like a 2.0 or something stitch length. And that's that, and that's the beauty of that. So I'm sure there's a lot more advantages of Embird over other programs, but these are the biggies that I can think of offhand. So I hope I've helped somebody to make a decision. Now here are some designs from the new version of Embird, Embird 2022, and this is an upgrade. It's really not that much of an upgrade as far as, money to pay out of pocket. I went from the 2019 version to this 2022 version, and it was, I believe, $80. So it's really well worth it. And if you're just buying Embird for the first time, that's not even going to be a cost for you. You're just going to pay the regular cost of Embird. So all you newbies would really be getting a deal, because now you can see the stipple. On the left here is one of the stipples that they offer in their quilt fill tool. And you can see this outline that I put around. I just put that around there myself because I figured if I'm going to make a quilt like this, I probably stitch this micro stipple in the center just on the quilt top, not with any batting. And then I would stitch the satin word love, and then that's it. And then once the quilt is layered, in other words, when I put the quilt top, then the batting, then the backing, well, at that point then is when I would hoop it on my embroidery machine. I would stitch this outline so that it really makes this pop. And it's really going to be just beautiful because this will just pop out. And, or, I could have done this with the batting, but it will smash it down. So this is just one artistic technique, one type of design that you can do. But at any rate, so when I put it in the embroidery machine with all the 3 layers, I would stitch this, because that's what a lot of long arm quilters do. They'll stitch an echo around what they want to accentuate. If they want this to pop out, then yes, they would stitch this around. And this will pop out in the middle. And then the bigger stipple will go on the outside. So when I bring it to the embroidery machine, the only thing I have to line up is I'll line up my needle with, say, this point and this point, and that's really all I have to do. Or I could have a crosshair in my design and a crosshair on the fabric with like water-soluble pen or marker or just a template. And then I could, have that same crosshair in the design over here as my first object. And then I would trace that crosshair in the design by just using the fast forward buttons on the machine. And I would see if that crosshair uh, lines up with the needle as I'm tracing. If I go to the beginning of the crosshair up here, let me just show you real quick. I'll just make a small cross and I'll center it. Click on this one and then this one, and then I'll align their centers. And so now that crosshair is there. I'll make it a bright red. And then I'll make the size bigger. I'll make it just 100 mils. I might have to make it a little bigger. 90, 180. So I'll make it 200. Well, I better just make it 180 though, because I don't want to go outside my hoop. So I'll make it 180 by 180. And so now, when I go to my machine, since this is my first object, I have my fabric, my quilt hoop, my quilt sandwich hooped, but I might have hooped it crookedly. Well, all I have to do is, before you even check for rotation, you would check for center. So since this crosshair is placed in the center of my hoop, then the needle, when you first open the design, the needle comes to the center. Well, if your needle's over here, then you use the buttons on your machine to jog your needle to the center of your design on your fabric. And then once you've checked for center, then you'll fast forward through this crosshair to make sure that your needle is running directly on center. And if it's not, if say your needle starts over here, well then that means as it comes down, it's going to be over here on the right. So that just means that you have to rotate your needle. Your needle's like a spinner. Think of it like a game board, a spinner. Your needle has to be rotated counterclockwise, a few degrees. So then you would use your rotation tools on your machine, and then you would trace it again to see if you're on the center line. So that's what I would do. So I would, and I usually have templates either stitched out on stabilizer that you could see through, or stitched out on vinyl, or just drawn out on vinyl with my Cricut maker. Or you could just draw it on. You could just draw your crosshair on, like I said, with water-soluble pen. And you don't have to draw it all the way through, but you would want to put a dot, maybe a dot here at this point, and a dot here, and then a dot in the center. And then that's really all you'll need, to be honest. So I would hoop the fabric, I'd check for center, jog my machine if I need to, then check for rotation, rotate the needle, quote unquote. You're not really rotating the needle, but it's easier to understand if you use that terminology. So you rotate the needle, and then after that, once you're set, I would I would fast forward probably through this outline just to make sure that the points are exactly where I want them to be. And I probably only have to do fast forward from, say, here to here, maybe this one. And then I'll go back and stitch it, and then let it stitch the stipple. And so that's how I would do it. And now here is another quilt fill. These are called vines. And there's another version of this called scratches. It looks just like this, but it's straighter. It's a little straighter. And in the center is this micro stipple. So it's the same as this, but it's the micro stipple. And this that I'm using actually isn't the stipple. I'll show you. It's called the Wanderer. I seem to really like the Wanderer a lot. So, so that's nice. And then there's so many other choices. I'll just show you a few more. If I get rid of those, well, it's not that one. It's this one here. Here's some pebbles. They call them circles. And those are very popular for quilters, and you can make them even bigger. And there you go. So for my machine, I have only an 8-inch hoop. It's 8 inches by 9.5 because I have a Janome MB4 multi-needle. So my blocks are going to be 7 inches. And so I believe this, if you look down here, it's 180 by 180. And that's about, let's see, measure in inches. Yeah, about 7 inches if you look at the bottom. So that way I don't have to go to the end of my hoop, and I can also add another square just outside of these pebbles if I wanted, because then that would be almost like a stitch in the ditch, but you're not in the ditch. You're, say, 1/8 of an inch from the ditch of the block. And a lot of quilters do that as well. It just makes the block look really pretty and professional. And again, you can make sure that your corners of your block are situated correctly. So to do that, I could do that even right here in Editor, insert basting stitches, but instead of making them, I'll click this, instead of making them long, I'll just make them 2.2, which is the stitch length I like to use for quilting in the hoop. And then I would say okay, and then I would line that up. I'll just line it up with the crosshair. The crosshair's in the right spot, so I'll click the crosshair, click the square, click the alignment tool, click centers, centers, and click OK. But now I have to resize it, and let's see, if I make it 7.5, it'll be, that might work. 7.5. And yes, it was, so that's coming right to the edge of this design, which is fine. That is fine. I probably wouldn't be stitching this satin that you see in here. That's just there. I don't know why I put it in there, but so, and I'll click outside. So then it would look something like that, of course, without the cross here. And of course, this would be the same color as the rest of the design. And so that would really accentuate your block. If your block were like right there and there, that would be perfect. And you could decide, you know, what how far away you want this extra outline. So those are like really nice echo stitches, you know, on the inside, just inside the block and just outside your design that you're wanting to accentuate. So it's just the sky's the limit. It's the sky is the limit. And I do plan on making a tutorial on the new quilt fills and so on. It's really fun. The way that I've been doing it is I've been taking, say, this outline, this hexagon outline that you see, and I won't go into total detail, but I believe it's this one that I use. I'm going to split after this color and split before that color. So I'll get rid of the outside edge by Xing. Okay, so these two colors here, if I click on them, one color you'll see down in the item window, the red color is this box, and it doesn't matter, it's satin, but normally it would probably just be a single running stitch. And then the other item in this object is the hexagon. If I click on it, you'll see the hexagon. So you have those two joined together. If they're not joined together, if they're like this, if I click unjoin, if they're like this and they're separate, click one, hold control, click the other and join them. Once they're joined, now you can go to insert, effect, cavity, and I'm not going to inflate it or anything. I don't want to ignore the cavity. I want them to include the cavity. Uh, this is just kind of a workaround. So I'll show you. It'll make two cavities and we just end up deleting the inner one unless you want to keep it, but you probably don't. So we click on cavity, zero inflate, uncheck this, say OK, and it takes you to this window. And this is the window where you can choose all your different quilting fills and motifs. The quilt one is the one that will meander around or do pebbles around without any travel stitches or anything. And these also, the red work, the Celtic, the fractal, they'll all do it as well, but they're just different. It's just a different look. And so, like I said, I'll be doing a tutorial on all of that. So if you just want to go into the quilt window, you just click quilt. And here's all your choices. Here's the standard stipple that they offer, but I like the Wanderer. It's just a little bit different. And I have my settings, so let's see. If I use the Wanderer, and I wrote it down, and I'll put this in a PDF when I make the video. For the Wanderer, I went a distance of 10, meaning the spacing. That's kind of like the density almost. It's like the spacing between elements as it wanders is 8 millimeters. So 8 millimeters is a little over a quarter, and it's less than a half because 12 is half a mil, 6 is a quarter. So this is about 3/8 of an inch spacing. And then the tangent I leave at 40%. I think their default might have been 30%, and I changed it. Random is the point distribution. Offset 0. Bounce 0. Offset is the offset from the hoop edge. Bounce is the offset from the design in the center. So I'll set them both to 0. My stitch length is 2.2. Layers, meaning how many layers of stitching. We just want one layer, which is great. You can bump it up, but when you do a wander or a stipple, you have the choice of it being one layer, because of course it's easier to make just one layer of stitching when your stitching is just wandering around. We can cut out a design and we don't have to have any travel stitches. Even long armors can't do that. If they cut something out in the center, they can't travel around it. They have to make travel stitches and tie-ons and tie-offs. So this is great for us. So at any rate, those are my settings, and then I click OK, and there it is, and you'll see there's stitches in the center. So here we are. Here's our object. Here's our two items. Let me make that a different color. So if I click outside, you'll see there's stipple in the middle and stipple on the outside. And so you look in your item window, now the stipple on the inside is highlighted. If I click this one, stipple on the outside is highlighted. Well, I want to get rid of the stipple on the inside, so I right click, delete item, and now we're done. And now if that's too far away for you, you can by all means go in again. You can delete this one, and you can go in and change your settings a little. So I go Insert, Effect, Cavity, Inflate 0, Quilt, and now I could say, maybe I'll try a -1 mil on both of my offsets, both the one for the hoop and the one for the design, and maybe it'll get closer. We'll see. Sometimes you don't want it too close, because then you might have a hard time lining it up, with your embroidery machine, because you already have stuff stitched down. But this should be okay. So we'll click OK. And that looks like it went in a little bit closer. And again, we can Control Z, and I could try -2. So it's still selected. Insert, Effect. And just know, if you make the stipple distance smaller, it'll get closer to your design and your hoop anyways. But I like to keep it airy, and that can also affect things. It may not be able to get any closer because, it's a more airy, open stipple. But let's just see. So there, I'm pretty close now. It looks like I banged in right here. So that might have been too much. So I'd Control Z, and now I'll try 2.5. Or I might have been okay with the 2. -2.5. So that's kind of a good number right there. I like that. So I'd click on it, and again, let me change the color just so you can see when it's highlighted. So down here in the items window, you can see the outside is highlighted, but the inside is what we want to get rid of. Right click, delete item. Oops, I didn't have my left button. There we go. And so there you have it. So that's kind of how you would do, just that one. Now, if you wanted to do a different one, let's say you wanted to do, let me just delete that one. Let's say, so I'm clicking the same two, they're items now, but they used to be objects when they were separated. But I'm clicking that again because you have to have a contour here or an outline, and then another outline so we can fill this cavity. I'll do one more. I'll do Insert, Effect, Cavity, I'll go into the fractal. So the fractal is amazing. You've got all of these designs. Of course, that's my favorite. There's more pebbles there. And, I mean, look at all the designs you have. It is just unbelievable. And if you want to, let's just use my favorite right here. I'll leave everything as is. I'm gonna make my distance, maybe I'll go with 6 just so maybe we can see more of this. And my stitch length, layers are 2. I cannot recall what that means, but we'll have to check that out when I make the full video. Okay, and so here we are again. Now you can see I still have my 2 items, my inside and my outside, but there's no travel stitches. If I go ahead and delete this inside, delete item, and let me just get rid of this outline for a minute. I'll just hide it. You can't do this on a long arm. If you tried to cut out this hexagon on your long arm, you would have travel stitches. Because long arms, I mean, they don't know how to do that. They're not as advanced. I haven't seen a long arm program that can do that. And I've asked several of the long arm educators, and it's always, there's travel stitches and there's tie-ons and tie-offs. So there would be a tie-on or a tie-off here, tie-on here, tie-off here, tie-on, tie-off, tie-on, tie-off. It would be a nightmare. So you could have them doing ties all the way around, or you can have it stitching regular stitches to each one. But they don't guarantee that you'll get exactly 2 layers. Sometimes they'll cross over each other and sometimes they won't. And you'll see that on the long arm videos. Well, we, as embroiderers who own Embird, have the luxury of it just stitching perfectly. It's just amazing. It is amazing. So that's just a quick peek into just a lot of 2022, what it offers you. And believe me, when I make my 2022 video, it's going to probably be really long. So here is yet another type of quilting in the hoop that you can do. So obviously with this design, I could stitch it all at the same time with the batting, backing, and quilt top, or I could stitch out the flower with just the quilt top in the hoop and then layer my batting and backing later on when I'm done with my quilt top. So I could have several quilt squares that have flowers or gardening things or whatever your theme is. And you could do something like this then.